Okay.
Namaste, Sarji. I hope you can hear me.
Namaste.
You need to unmute on the right-hand side bottom. You need to unmute on the CH.
Yes, got it.
Yeah. Namaste, Sarji.
Namaste, Raviji. Namaste, Vidya ji.
Namaste, Esther ji. Good to see you here again.
Good to see you too.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to have you here again. It's been a long time since actually you visited our room. I mean, as in like to do the program.
August, right? We had a talk in August.
I think so, yes. Last August. And you were here for the Conrad G's program. You were on the speaker panel, asking questions and all.
Yes.
I think actually we can go ahead with Vidya ji giving the intro, and we can start from there.
Yeah. Sure. Right. Yeah. So SmJ really needs not much of an introduction. All the same, we need to let everyone know all about her. So here goes. Esther Dhanraj, also known as Kamakshi, is a staunch upholder of Sanatana Dharma. She holds a master's degree in English literature from Osman University, India, in apologetics from Luther Rice University, Georgia, USA. Enabled by her master's degree as well as her former faith, she has gained expertise on divinity doctrines and practices. She's engaged actively in debates and talks on TV and social media channels, in addition to actively supporting dharmic causes at the grassroots level in rural India. SmJ requests Indian followers of the Abrahamic faiths to examine it fearlessly. She describes herself as one who was initially a blind follower of the Christian faith, who then went on to become an investigator of both Sanatana Dharma as well as Christianity, finally turning into an intellectual Kshatriya who had actually figured out the insidious nature of the proselytizing clergy of the Abrahamic ideology. SmJ emphasizes the need for Indians to become courageous, raise rational questions about any faith that they follow, so that they do not end up becoming blind believers and ultimately victims of this blind faith. She counsels families and helps rescue youngsters who have gone off the track of Dharma. Her active and dedicated contributions, along with other like-minded dharmic individuals, are a true Dharma warrior. And SmJ, it's a pleasure to have you on this platform. Thank you, Ravi. Over to you, SmJ. Mic is all yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vidya ji. I must ask you to write my bio next time. Anybody asks me to give a few lines or a few paragraphs about myself, I'm so lost, I'm so clueless as to what I should write, what I should not write. But you picked up just the right points from my bio of, say, 25 to 30 years of bio, and you put it in a nutshell, yet you covered everything. Thank you so much for a beautiful, beautiful bio. Yeah, before I move on into the topic, Raviji, just let me know if my audio is clear.
Audio is clear.
I have a very bad throat.
Yeah, if you need to take water or something in between, actually do take it.
Yeah, I do have it here. So even if you ask me not to, I will still go ahead and have it.
So you have about 45 to an hour to explain the topic, and then we will take some questions from the audience. So when you finish, let me know. Then I will open it for questions.
Sure.
All right, go ahead.
So the topic we're discussing today is Teresa. Is she a nun of Jesus or agent of the Vatican? So I will not give my opinion as yet as to what she was, but I will give it at the end, and I'll also leave it to the audience for them to decide, like who she was loyal to. So at the outset, I want to note that I'm not going to suffix Teresa with the title mother. She's no mother, at least not to me, because of the nature of the love she represented. It was purely conditional. And we know as parents and children that the only love that is unconditional in this material world is mother's love. And Teresa's love, if it can even be called that, did not come without conditions. So she does not get called mother by me. Anybody else is free to call her that way, but not me. So with that thing cleared, I want to make another thing clear. Look, I'm a trained theologian. Of course, I'm using my training to question the veracity of Christianity's claims and not for defending them, which is actually the expected outcome of academic instruction in theology. If I had murdered my ethics some 10, 11 years ago and chosen the easy route, I would have been pretending to be a believing Christian today, and I would have been using the same training that I'm using today to counter Christianity. I would have been using it to defend Christianity and to promote it. Had I given up my ethics. But I didn't, and instead I chose to use my unique position to counter the most important aspect of Christianity, which is theology. So theology is an important aspect to question because it is this aspect that is used by Christians to claim superiority over Hinduism. So from the context of India, I don't care about any other place in the world right now. Right now and forever, I think I would be only bothered about protecting my country and my folks, Hindus. My approach to this work, my approach to this whole criticism of Christianity is only from the context of India and Hinduism and Hindus. So by that definition, questioning the theology is very important. And I would say that there are very few people in India, at least, that actually question Christianity from its theology. Because to do that, one has to be both a practitioner and and should have done academic study on theology. So I think that I'm in that unique position, or Bhagwan has placed me in that unique position for a reason. And I have no qualms in utilizing my seminary education to counter Christianity, actually. So I have made I've made the theological impediments of Christianity and Christians the prime area of countering, especially of those Christians who are claimed to have been allegedly chosen by their God himself to do his work of promoting Christianity. In other words, Christian leaders who are actually supposed to have been filled with the Holy Spirit, like the world-renowned evangelists and missionaries like the late Ravi Zacharias and dozens of others who have faltered in the present times, and Teresa of yesteryears. So coming to Teresa, many have done extensive work on Teresa and her so-called service, like Christopher Hitchens and our very own Arup Chatterjee, and many others. So Hitchens mostly spoke about her work, or the lack thereof. And Arup documented how she shot to fame from being an obscure nun who was just another employee on the payroll of Vatican to a global icon. So that's also a very interesting read that Arup Chatterjee covered. I'm not sure how many here in this group have actually read his work. It's called The Untold Story of Teresa, and I think everybody must read to know how just an ordinary nun became an international icon. So I am going to talk about Teresa's theology and her faith, or should I say the lack of faith. The reason this topic is important when discussing Teresa and her life and the disruptions she made to the Indian ecosystem, this is important because the whole crux of Christianity lies in the fact that when a person becomes a Christian, he is transformed into a new being, and everything that the person does is done not by the person himself, but by the God who came to reside in that person upon conversion, upon transformation. That is what is loosely the meaning of born again. This whole born again jargon that is used, that is what it actually means. So for lay people, that is lay converts, lay Christians, it's just a personal spiritual experience. But the people people that are claimed to have been specially chosen and ordained by God himself to convert others, this transformation, this born again experience is the God-given authority to convert others. By that definition, we are examining today if Teresa had that authority to convert others. I would say Teresa seriously lacked that authority by her own words. I am not saying this, it is by her own words where she went ahead and said that she lost her faith, she's not feeling the presence of God anymore. But she hid it, she kept it a secret, and she went about her missionary activities for some reasons that I'm going to list here today. And my talk will be mostly about that aspect, that private, secret, sinistral aspect of her life. So, and it was this ambition to become the most favored nun of the Vatican. It is her desire, that material desire to become famous internationally, and most important of all, it was her delusion, which actually kept her away from disclosing this fact to the public, to the general public, and even most of her colleagues. Except her bosses, nobody knew that she was facing difficulties. She was having struggles with her faith. So, of course, the bosses eventually gave it a theological spin and brainwashed her and manipulated her intense love for Christianity to their own agenda, to further the agenda of the church. So, what is the source of the information that I'm going to share today? That Teresa suffered loss of faith. I wouldn't say lost her faith. She didn't take it till there. If she was honest enough, that would have been the case, but she wasn't. So what is the source of information for me to say that she struggled with her faith all through her entire career? It is her letters that she wrote to her bosses, Father Van Exem and Archbishop Ferdinand Pereira, and other directors to whom she reported. Now, these letters, she wanted them to destroy. She didn't want any of these letters, and time and again, for several decades, she kept requesting her bosses to destroy these letters because she did not want anybody to know what she was facing in her, the struggles she was facing in her faith. But her bosses somehow kept this. Maybe they have another agenda. They wanted to give it a theological spin, which they did. Later, these letters were compiled by a biographer called Brian Kolodichuk into a book called Mother Teresa, Come Be My Light. And this is one of her biographies which covers the most secretive aspects of her life, which no other biographers that actually wrote her autobiography have covered. So in these letters, she expressed something that she calls a deep darkness, an irreparable, intolerable vacuum in her spiritual life. So she said that she felt numb spiritually and did not feel the presence of God in her heart. She even questioned if there was God. She went to that extent. And I would say that this is a very serious situation for a faithful Christian. Now, let me give you context. To what Teresa felt was exactly what Charles Templeton felt. I'll tell you who Charles Templeton is. And this is exactly what I felt. This is exactly what the Esthers of this world feel and go through. And this is the very first phase of taking U-turn out of Christianity. Now, why is Templeton so important? So Templeton was a Canadian evangelist who co-founded the world-renowned Christian organization called Youth for Christ, along with Billy Graham. And Billy Graham is the evangelist who converted most of India and Africa in the 80s and 90s. Today, the second and third generation Christians we are seeing have probably been converted by Billy Graham. So Charles Templeton belonged to that category of evangelist, a passionate evangelist. He reported an intense feeling of spiritual godlessness in his life, a spiritual vacuum, the exact words that Teresa used in her letters. Darkness, godlessness, is there God? So this intolerable pain of the absence of God, these are the words even Templeton reported. But the difference between Templeton's and Esther's and Teresa is that the Templetons and Esthers actually drop everything else that they are doing in their life and sit down to scrutinize their faith as to why this is happening. But Teresa lacked this kind of honesty. She actually never bothered to even give it a second thought and evaluate it herself. So I would say this happens to every honest Christian who takes the time to sit down to conduct a root cause analysis of why he or she is feeling the absence of God all of a sudden after having experienced a great relationship with God. Now, not every Christian that experiences the absence is honest enough to conduct a scrutiny of his or her faith. Christians that have something to lose if they are not Christians anymore, or those that don't know anything better than Christianity to fall back on, or those that fear change and experimentation of their faith, and most importantly, those with vested interests will refrain from conducting a scrutiny of their faith. Now, in India, that resistance is driven by ego. Just imagine a few years ago or decades ago, these converts may have angered their relatives by converting to Christianity or criticized their non-converted relatives and friends for not seeing the Christian truth or for worshipping demons. So they would have been engaged in all these activities. What face will they have to admit that they were wrong in converting? So even if people are struggling with their faith, they will never come out and tell because it will hurt their ego. So it's definitely a matter of ego. So there are several different reasons for not conducting a thorough scrutiny, even when they are faced with skepticism. So many a time they are not even aware that what they are experiencing is the beginning of loss of faith. Now, as I said, this is the worst situation for a Christian to be in. Now, scrutiny follows interpretation. Honest scrutiny follows unbiased, clear interpretation. That was the difference between Templeton, Esther, and Teresa. So, honesty. So, this woman was either too egoistic or too selfish or too greedy, or I would say even too immature to even give her this nagging, godless experience a second thought. Again, I would also go into a little detail and tell such experience is unique to the Christian faith and perhaps to other Abrahamic faiths also, in which the goal is eternal life in a physical heaven, and the only way to achieve it is through appeasing the most unappeasable, unsatisfiable being. And in this religion, it's the belief that humans have no merit in and of themselves, and without the grace, mercy, and favor of their God, they are incapable of doing any good at all. So Christians who take this teaching seriously, which is most of them, constantly live in the fear of upsetting and angering their highly sensitive, easily offendable, extremely wrathful, constantly judging and unforgiving God. Everything Christians do is only to appease their unappeasable God and for getting a small pat on their back by their God. So a slightest misstep on this tightrope walk terrifies them that they have upset their God and that he left them. That is exactly what Teresa was going through. Now, while the experience itself is found more in Abrahamic faiths, I would say spiritual ups and downs can occur to any devotee of any deity in any religion at any time. I'm not saying that spiritual upheaval, spiritual ups and downs are not there for worshippers of Hindu deities. But the crux lies in the fact that no matter how intense faith is until a point in time, it requires serious scrutiny when faced with even the slightest feeling of emptiness. This applies to all faith groups of all religions. See, I feel that I'm digressing here a little bit, but I think this is important. Our minds are connected to the universe around us more than they are to us. Now I'm separating our mind from the rest of our being here. So in that sense, the minds are more connected to the universe. So when there is a slight misstep, the mind can sense it instantly. Before the feeling takes over our entire being, it's the mind that senses it. Now it asks for action to be taken. If we ignore, we are bound to go in the wrong direction, which more often than not results in chaos to the ecosystem that we live in. That is how important, scrutinizing our spiritual life is on a daily basis or on a regular basis. Teresa lacked both the honesty and the spiritual maturity to grasp the meaning of her emptiness and look at the description. Just look at the description she caused to the Indian ecosystem by her lack of honesty and spiritual maturity. Now, the question is, did she really bring happiness to the dying souls she converted? Well, she went ahead and she said that I have given the best destination to all these souls. I have given them the intimate union with Christ. But who asked her? Who told her that that was what was going to give her happiness? She did not even have the maturity to evaluate her own spiritual situations. What was she? Was she in a position to even evaluate other spiritual happiness or spiritual bliss? I would say that is hypocrisy, or that is sheer laziness or pure arrogance. So the question, did she bring happiness to the dying souls? I think is a deep philosophical question that really needs contemplation from the context of comparative religion. Maybe we can host another talk. People that are really interested in comparative religion, of comparing theologies in Hinduism and Christianity. Maybe Raviji, you can organize another talk at some point. And I think we can definitely have experts coming in. I'm not saying I'm an expert. Maybe I can talk about Christian theology, but definitely I have no knowledge of Hindu philosophy. So we definitely need experts, and we can have a panel discussion. So continuing about Teresa, I would say her dishonesty was caused by her selfish motive to achieve something, and that something is sainthood. A sainthood is a goal of every nun. It is not money that nuns are after. In fact, the more abstinence they practice, the more their chances of sainthood, beatification. So in that sense, I would say Teresa was just a mortal nun with a deep material desire to achieve the label of sainthood. And that desire, that greed, made her choose hypocrisy over honesty, to the point that she hid her struggles with faith and faked happiness to her colleagues and the general public, so that no one knew of her spiritual vacuum and report it, which would mar her chances of getting sainthood. And she went about her conversion activity as if God, the God that she worshipped, had blessed her with immense spiritual bliss and enrichment. Now, her biographer wrote this. He said, the inner agony would not weaken Teresa's activities. With her inspiring leadership, she guided the other nuns, started new centers, but inside she was in utter emptiness. I would call it hypocrisy. Especially walking on a spiritual path, giving philosophical lectures to people, preaching on establishing a relationship with God, when she herself was empty, knowing that she was empty, it was all shallow, it was all hollow inside, she still went out and preached. That is nothing but hypocrisy in today's, in the modern sense of the word. So she went about converting more and more people, focused on becoming famous. All the while, she was carrying a big spiritual hollow within. Now, beside the material desire for sainthood, there is something else that drove Teresa to convert people, her delusion. Now, let me explain what was going on here. Teresa, like any other nun in the Christian world, was married to Jesus. Jesus took her to be a wife, and Teresa vowed to serve Jesus as her husband. So on May 24th, 1937, Teresa approached the altar like any bride and said yes to Jesus and committed herself to him in a spousal love for the rest of her life. So this is no more a devotee God relationship. This is a husband-wife relationship. So the ceremony took place in a convent chapel in Darjeeling with some archbishop, if I'm right, Perrier, performing the work of the chief priest. Now, in her own words, she experienced union with Jesus. We don't know how to interpret that, and I don't want to interpret it here. But what we do know is that her desire to convert others to Christianity stemmed from the delusional union she experienced with Jesus. Jesus was her husband, and she was in spousal love with him. But Jesus was not satisfied with just her love. Look how twisted this whole thing is in the name of theology. So she believed that Jesus was not satisfied with just her love. She believed that Jesus longed and thirsted for more. And she was a dutiful wife that was chosen to bring more spousal love to Jesus. So it's like, I mean, this is really twisted. Put it in the material sense and think for yourself. I will not go into those details. I mean, it's just so gross for me to even talk about it. And here people are practicing it and calling it religion and relationship with God. So she converted not because people needed Jesus and his salvation, as Christianity or even her sympathizers today claim. She basically believed that Jesus longed for the love of humans and thirsted for their souls. So she was basically feeding her soul-hungry husband with souls. More souls, actually. Her soul was not enough. Or the people that came by themselves and offered their souls to Jesus, that was also not enough. She believed that Jesus thirsted for more souls. My husband is soul hungry, so I have to feed him. It's like that, by hook or crook. By hook or crook, what I mean by hook or crook is even on people's deathbeds, Teresa conducted conversions. We know that. So her understanding of conversion or Jesus's thirst was twisted, as if that was not enough. Her understanding of pain and suffering of human beings was also very twisted. See, Christians do not have that concept of karma. That is where the whole problem comes from. So if they have the problem of karma, if they know the doctrine of karma, the concept of karma, they would easily interpret why people are suffering. But because they lack that, the deep, complex understanding of why people suffer, why there is pain in this world, they come up with their own interpretations. And Teresa's was, I would say, the most bizarre, most ridiculous, and most twisted of all understandings. So her understanding of pain and suffering was something like this. She said she was a sincere wife, and her sincere wife who longed for a complete union with Jesus. She believed that Jesus suffered, her spouse suffered on the cross, and so she, who called herself his little bride, could not do otherwise than be united to him in his suffering. This is what the biographer said. So what it means is she could not resist joining in him being united with him in his suffering. So she had to partake in his suffering. But just by partaking, she herself partaking in it, she could not remove his pain, right? So she put herself to more pain and she brought others to the suffering that Jesus suffered. I hope you're understanding what I'm trying to say. So this seems as if seeing others suffer actually helped Jesus cope with the pain of his own suffering. And we know how she put others to suffering. In fact, even her nuns, she did not spare even her nuns. She used to subject them to more abstinence than the Vatican actually demanded of them. And she would not give more than 2 clothes or something like that, 2 changes. And they had to wash it and there was no water most of the time. So the reason she did all this is with the simple understanding that by doing this, she was partaking in the suffering that Jesus went through so as to reduce his pain. That implies that Jesus is that sadist who derives pleasure even in his suffering when he sees others suffer. That is really twisted, I would say. So whether spiritual, physical, or emotional, she always gave people the highest pain that she could, and this gave her a high, knowing that this made her husband happy. Now, how twisted is that? So poor Jesus, even if he were really alive, he would really hate this child of his who's actually making him look like a sadist and monster. I would just say that. So next, her delusion did not stop there. She reported hearing voices in her head, which she eventually concluded were Jesus's voices. He called her, she said that he called her my own spouse. That's how he addressed her. That's how he would call her, I believe. And she replied, saying, my Jesus, my own Jesus. And during this dialogue, Jesus revealed his thirst for people who suffered the most. So he loved to see people suffer. That's what she said through her work and through her letters also. And during this conversation, Jesus revealed to her that he chose Teresa to bring all these suffering people to him. And so her duty towards him was to just find as many poor and destitute people as she could to satisfy Jesus's thirst for the poor and suffering souls. So to fulfill this duty, she even quit the prestigious position as the principal of St. Mary's School, and she decided to take to the streets, because back then with Bengal famine and all that, there were more because of British's, policies. There was so much of destitution all around. There was so much of poverty all around, and most of the poverty was seen on the streets. And Teresa decided that if she was sitting in a principal's chair in a prestigious school, she wouldn't be able to fulfill this thirst of Jesus for souls. Couldn't feed the hunger of Jesus for souls. So what she did was she quit her job as a principal and she took to streets. Of course, this was also her way to her chances of sainthood were more secured this way. The more abstinence, the more service, the better the chances of getting sainthood. So this decision was the starting of the missionaries of charity. And I would say that the missionaries of charity was also a result of a delusion that was caused in her acute illness. So what happened was, during the Bengal famine in erstwhile Calcutta, there was food rationing was there. There was a time where food was rationed. And while working on the streets, Teresa had actually succumbed to tuberculosis. And her bosses told her to go to Darjeeling for rehab, rest and recovery. On her train journey, probably in a state of delirium, when we have, high fever and all that, people go into delirium and we hear voices, we blabber something that does not make sense. Maybe she was in that state on the train journey. And in that state of delirium, perhaps, she heard a voice telling her the method by which she could satisfy Jesus' thirst for physical suffering. She said that on that train journey, I heard a voice, and that voice was of Jesus telling me that I should start a missionary. I should quit my job as a principal and take to the streets to serve the poor and destitute. So that is where she heard that voice. Now that idea, at first, even her bosses said that she was daydreaming or she was hearing voices in her head or it was just a delusion. And they did not give her the permission to start it. For several months after that, probably even years, she wrote back to her bosses, pleading them to give her the permission to start Missionaries of Charity. And each time they said that, let us give it some time, because we don't know whether that was your delusion in your sickness or whether that was really the voice of God. But eventually she convinced them, and Missionaries of Charity started. So what was the goal of Missionaries of Charity? She clearly mentioned. She said, the general end of the Missionaries of Charity is to satiate the thirst of Jesus Christ on the cross. The aim of the congregation is to satiate the thirst of Jesus on cross. As simple as that. So the whole crux of her missionary activity was her mystical experience on that train. Her mystical experience of Jesus dying on the cross, crying out, I thirst. So there is this story mentioned in the Gospels where Jesus is hanging on the cross, and at one of the words he uttered 7 words, the Bible says. One of the words he uttered is, I thirst. Now, I thirst became the crux of her missionary activity in India. She thought that Jesus, she believed, and she even instructed her sisters, the other nuns, saying that, I thirst. When Jesus said that on the cross, Jesus was actually deprived of every consolation. There was nobody to console him. There was nobody to love him. He was left all alone to die in absolute poverty. He was left alone, despised and broken in body and soul. So when he said, I thirst, it was not for water. He was yearning for love, for suffering, to see people sacrifice, to see people abstain. So she made up all these stories in her mind, which is why I say that her entire ministry was based on the delusional interpretations of the Bible, the delusional interpretations of the Christian message. So nothing real there. First of all, even the Christian message itself is so illogical and so absurd. Top of that, she had a delusional interpretation, wrong, twisted interpretation of that already absurd, illogical message. So she found pleasure in seeing others sacrifice because she thought that made her Jesus happy, that made her husband happy. So that was her sole goal, of making her husband happy. So she sacrificed, believing that is what made Jesus happy. Like I said, that actually makes Jesus look like a sadist. I'm not sure how happy, but he definitely looks like a sadist with this kind of interpretation. But even after so much of abstinence and effort, Jesus abandoned her. Even after experiencing that intimacy and union with Jesus, she came to a stage where she began questioning if he was really there. And at first, when she got these feelings at first, her feeling of God's absence actually threw her off guard. But look at the power of brainwashing. It manifested yet again when her bosses and several of her directors that she reported to convinced her that her painful inner experience was not loss of faith, but on the contrary, they convinced her that it was an essential part of her missionary work. And look at the whole theological spin they gave to this feeling. They said, the more darkness you feel, Teresa, the more conversions you are supposed to do. The more vacuum you feel, the more aggression you're supposed to display in converting people. In fact, the more vacuum you feel, the more crooked and cruel you become. That's what basically she did, right, with her in her service. So the more she experienced the abandonment of Jesus, the more enriched she was supposed to feel. That is what her bosses counseled her with. So this delusional, illogical woman was made to believe by the Vatican that Jesus longed for love and was thirsty for souls. And he made that known to her by making her feel his absence in her own life. There cannot be any more twisting than this in any religious philosophy. Twisting of the whatever, I mean, the most absurd interpretation to an already absurd message. So that is the heights of absurdity in Christianity, absurdity within absurdity. So, let me, for those for whom this is very difficult to grasp, I'll repeat this. So Teresa was so delusional and so illogical, but the Vatican just manipulated her intense, illogical, absurd love for Jesus for their own benefit, wherein they said that Jesus longed for love and thirsted for souls. And how did he make Teresa know of this? By absenting himself from her own life. So Jesus, it's like a crooked human being to make, or that stubborn son who wants to make his parents know of his importance by just running away from home, or hiding away from their sight, or not communicating with them. So here the Vatican bosses said that Jesus is making his presence, his importance felt, or he's making his hunger and thirst known by absenting himself from you because you love him so much. He's actually emotionally blackmailing you. That's, I mean, to be very precise and put it in simple words, he is emotionally blackmailing you so that you will go out and bring more people, more souls to him to quench his thirst. So you could say that her Vatican bosses actually manipulated her intense love for Jesus to further the church's agenda of Christianizing India. That is how foolish Teresa was. So, but can we put all that blame on her bosses and absolve her of her fraud? I would say no. It does not absolve her of her fraud. Even in the midst of facing such skepticism and secretly questioning if there was God, she continued to do deathbed conversions. She continued to preach publicly of the Jesus whose presence she stopped feeling anymore in her life. And in the Christian jargon, this is actually called loss of faith, yet going out and preaching. That tantamounts to, I think, hypocrisy. Her faith seriously needed repair. And while her own faith was questionable, she converted people to Christianity. How ethical is that? I would say she had no ethical grounds to do that. She had a choice of refraining from her activity for at least a short period of time and sit down to scrutinize the reason for her spiritual shallowness. That's what all honest believers do, right? In any religion. But she did not care to do the exercise. Instead, she allowed herself to be drawn further into the delusion, and she also allowed her bosses to brainwash and manipulate her situation. Why? Because it also satisfied her own desires. I mean, it also complemented her already greedy desires that she had for sainthood and for fame and popularity. So before I move on to questions, I want to read some passages from her letters to substantiate what she said about her twisted theology, what I said about her twisted theology, her delusional experiences, and most importantly, her strained relationship with God. So she was a very emotional writer. As I said, she wasn't living in reality. She was living somewhere else. So her biographer first writes that Teresa could not hide her work among the poor. But what she did manage to keep hidden and with astonishing success were the most profound aspects of her relationship with God. Then in her letter, she writes, since 49 or 50, that is the year 1949 or 50, this terrible sense of loss, this untold darkness, loss in the sense loss of faith, this untold darkness, this loneliness, this continual longing for God, which gives me that pain deep down in my heart. Darkness is such that I really do not see, neither with my mind nor with my reason. The place of God in my soul is blank. There is no God in me. When the pain of longing is so great, I just long and long for God. He does not want me. He is not there. God does not want me. So I would say a statement like this coming from someone who force converted people, even on their deathbed, telling them that their conversion will secure their place in heaven, tantamounts to cheating. Because her own place in heaven is not secured and she knew it. But she was going out and preaching that if they convert, their place in heaven is secure. So somebody who is constantly in prayer and in fellowship with God and close union and intimate with God ends up in a spiritual void. I would say, what ethical grounds did she have to preach to others when she herself had no clarity about her faith? So next, moving on. Yeah, she says that, please pray for me, Father. It seems like God is not listening to me anymore. So I would want your intervention. Please pray for me. And time and again, she pleads every boss of hers to destroy the letters so the world does not know of her struggles with faith. Then she asks, do you think that my spiritual life is strewn with roses? That is a flower which I hardly ever find on my way. Quite the contrary. I have more often as my companion darkness, which is to say that my companion is not God anymore. And when the night becomes very thick, and it seems to me as if I will end up in hell. I mean, let me put this on record. A feeling like this, a feeling of godlessness in Christianity basically is the beginning of the loss of faith. I have mentioned this earlier, but I want to repeat it to make the importance of this situation known to my audience. This is the very first stage of taking the U-turn out of Christianity. Any honest person, if at that point would, instead of justifying or instead of twisting theology and getting satisfied with made up answers, if that person were to sit down and scrutinize that emptiness, that shallowness, that person will end up quitting Christianity. That is, I'm telling that out of experience and out of my own experience and out of the experience of so many other people that quit Christianity, devout, prominent Christians that quit Christianity. Then she says, I thirst, Jesus said on the cross. And when Jesus said on the cross, when Jesus was deprived of every consolation, dying in absolute poverty, left alone, despised and broken in body and soul. So our aim is to quench this infinite thirst of God made into man. Because he is God, his thirst is infinite. So Jesus is infinitely thirsty, and no matter how many spousal loves he gets, his thirst is still not quenched. So it is the godly, wifely duty of Teresa to provide those that love to Jesus, continuously provide that love for Jesus. So do you see here, for so much of claims that Christianity makes that she was so, her work was so humanitarian, she was very sympathetic and all that. I would say that is all, that was not the motive for her service. The only reason she served people was because she thought that this made Jesus happy, nothing else, not because she really loved human beings or she really loved India. So there is such terrible darkness within me as if everything was dead. It has been like this more or less from the time I started the work. I think many of our sick and suffering would be sanctified much quicker if they suffered more to satiate the thirst of Jesus. Many a sick has been comforted and taught to suffer for love of God. So she continuously talks about her how God was elusive, how she was not able to feel the presence of God. At one point, she says that the more I long for Jesus, the more he turns away from me. The more I want him, the less I am wanted. I want to love him, and as he has not been loved. So somehow she got this belief. She was deluded that Jesus was not loved enough. So it is her wifely duty towards him to provide that love for him, love to him. And therefore she converted people. I want to love him, and yet there is that separation, that terrible emptiness, that feeling of absence of God. So these are some of the things I would advise you to go ahead and read that book. Now, at the end, I just want to say that moral science tells us that one must have ethical grounds to teach and preach another person or people or another community. Practice first what you preach is the first rule of leadership. Anything, corporate or even in a spiritual setting or domestic setting, anything. So we as parents, we are told to model. So our kids we are told to practice first what we are about to preach our kids. But let's say Christians are not bound by moral science and ethics outside of the Bible. For such people, there is a similar verse in the Bible which gives the same lesson. It is a context of stoning an adulterous woman to death, an adulteress to death. And here Jesus says to the people who are getting ready to throw stones at her, he says, "May he without sin cast the first stone." This is clearly a lesson saying that only he who practices has the moral authority to preach others. Only he who has not sinned has the moral authority to judge that adulteress and throw stones at her and punish her. So it is as simple as that: practice what you preach. So in this case, I would say Teresa clearly had a strained relationship with God. So what moral ground, I'm asking this question again, what moral ground did she have to introduce others to a relationship which she herself could not fulfill, which she herself found unfulfilling, unsatiating? Now, the question we must ask is, did Teresa have the moral ground to convert Hindus to a faith that she clearly failed to experience? Raviji, on to you.
Very riveting talk, Esther Ji. I think actually we can take some questions from the audience. I will turn on the hand raising. The hand raising is on. Those who would like to ask a question can come up. And note, those who are coming up, I would like to request, you can ask your questions and Esther Ji would give you her opinion, but you cannot force to have your opinion from her. So be mindful of that. And those who are coming up, once you ask the question, when your answer is heard, we will send you back to the audience, which we usually do. Kindly cooperate with us. So I think the first person to ask is politically incorrect. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to be slightly devil's advocate here. You just said about her letters, where she is expressing her disbelief in God, or some kind of she has been abandoned by God or something like that. Can't you just compare it with this last words of Jesus Christ, Eli Eli lama sabachthani, kind of thing? Why? It's kind of a cry for attention, or a cry for attention towards God, or something similar to that. Instead of looking at totally in a negative way, I'm just wondering. I'm just trying to be slightly critical about that observation. You may answer it.
Okay. So the cry Eli Eli lama sabachthani on the cross, we don't know how true that is. I'm not willing to give it any historical credence to it. But here, Teresa was going about preaching people, changing the entire demography of India, disrupting the entire ecosystem of India. And she was the one who was deciding what made people happy, what people wanted, what was the end goal of people. She was the one making decisions for all those vulnerable people sleeping on, in a position to they were not even able to breathe properly in some cases. And she was in a rush to baptize them and convert them, thinking that that is what they needed. Now, how ethical is that? I would say that's really cruel. Coming to comparing it with Jesus's feeling of abandonment, that is also wrong. That is also has been criticized, because Jesus, being God himself, knowing what was to take place, knowing that this was all for a cause, knowing that he will be risen again and taken to heaven, saying that word makes him very, very human. Of course, Christians justify that he was now in a human form and he was bound to feel the pain. But who forced him into that pain? He took it. That was his decision, right? In the case of Teresa, the only thing I am objecting to is when she was going through that pain. I'm not saying going through that pain is wrong. The pain itself is not wrong. But what you do with that pain, with that stage, what action are you taking, and in which direction are you taking your suffering and your pain, your feeling of emptiness? That is what matters. I went through the same pain, as I said. Every devout Christian goes through that pain at some point. I mean, when you are acutely in devotion with in Christianity, as I said, it's the Christian theology that actually makes you go through that, because as humans you're incapable of doing any good at all. So it's only by the grace and mercy of God that something good, you can do something good. In that scenario, you're constantly living to appease that God. And any slight misstep, and you beat yourself, you curse yourself, you say that you were unworthy of Jesus's love and all that. So slightest misstep makes a Christian think that, oh, did I falter? Is that why Jesus abandoned me? Is that why I'm feeling this shallowness? Now, beginning there, either you rectify your walk, either you rectify your disciplines, or you sit down and evaluate. I'm doing everything right. I'm doing everything that Jesus has told me to. I'm doing everything that the Bible has told me to. Why am I feeling this shallowness? So that is the beginning. I told during the talk also, that is the beginning of the U-turn out of Christianity. So everybody faces it. So the point I'm making is the feeling itself is not wrong. Whether it was Jesus, let's say that he was in the human form and he felt human emotions, the feeling itself is not wrong. But what you do as human beings, as authoritative people over a religion, as somebody who is converting others, shouldn't you check whether you are even eligible, whether you even have the credentials to go out and preach, and to keep it a secret from public? That is what is wrong. So that is what I'm calling hypocrisy. That is what I'm calling fraud. That is what I'm calling out, not the feeling itself.
You have done it well. You explained it well, right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Lakshmi Chachi, you can go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Go ahead.
Namaste, Esther, and thank you so much for coming and giving us this riveting lecture. It was so wonderful. Thank you, organizers, for organizing this too. So my question is, in terms of, I know you're talking about her faith aspects here, but how much of a superiority complex in terms of racism did she have? Because there are certain essays about this too, where she felt that these poor brown people should be taught how to be civilized and have to convert to Christianity in order to get a civilized life. The motto that comes from the Western world, especially with Christianity, is brown people, black people, they are substandard people. They don't have civilization. They don't have authority to think independently. They have to be enslaved. And enslavement comes with conversions first. The conversions which happens, that is why they have a premium bounty on the heads. So, okay, this particular, the ones the caste system has been formed from the West imposed on India too, this particular sect will have this much money, this much money, this much money. So how much of this concept of racism or what you say, superiority complex is involved, where they feel that, oh my God, these poor souls, these brown converts have to be converted, they have to be civilized and brought back into, a little bit more dignified life. Thank you.
Yes, the question really is not how much. The question really is why. Why do they have such superiority complex? See, the whole messaging of Christian thing is that except Christians, everybody else is going to hell. So the messaging itself is wrapped in a superiority. It's superior. It's wrapped in superiority complex, let's say. So it stems out of the arrogance that only they have the truth on their side. Everybody else who doesn't have truth is doomed to hell. Everybody else who doesn't have Christianity is doomed to hell. So given that understanding of the message, they have been sent out. The Bible says, go and preach and convert the people. Why did that even come? How did even the idea of converting others to come? It simply implies that you are not good enough, or your religion is not good enough to save you. So isn't that superiority complex? Isn't that arrogance? And coming to Teresa, she, in fact, in these letters itself, she called, Calcutta streets as dark holes of the poor. So she said, I go into the hole, hell hole. I go into the scorching hell every day. I mean, when she is describing that she is going out on streets and seeking out these poor people to bring back to her homes. So she calls Calcutta as hole, a burning hole in hell, dark holes. So by dark, they don't mean poverty or poor or anything. By dark, they mean that we are all in dark. Hindus are all in dark. We did not see the light of Jesus. So whenever you come across the word dark in the Christian context, from the Christian missionary context, you have to understand it as not, it does not, they're not talking about poverty or ill health. Then they're simply talking about, we are not the enlightened ones. We are still in darkness. So that stems from arrogance. And where does that arrogance come from? From the Bible, from its theology. So the superiority complex is embedded into the theological message given by Jesus himself when he says that go out and preach, make disciples of all the nations, make them into Christians. He simply says that they need Christianity, which is to say that their religion is not good enough to save them. So you have to convert them to Christianity. So yes, the real question is, why there is superiority complex, and where does this come from? Not how much. They have it in tons.
Thank you so much. Raviji, can I ask one more question? I'll wait for my turn unless others are done, and then can I ask?
Sure, go ahead. You can ask now.
Oh, okay. There are certain rooms where, I always feel that plagiarism is also a part of Indian Christianity, where they plagiarize every aspect from, I have seen Jesus becoming Murugan to Vishnu to everything. But now the latest trend that has started is Vedantic. He invented Advaita. That is the concept. No, from my understanding, I am not a Christian. I have not read Bible much, but can you clarify? Is there anywhere any concept of Advaita, Vedanta? That means God resides everywhere. God is within you. You are within God. This concept, is it there, or is it purely dual, where God is one separate God and we are all his servants? Thank you.
Yeah, you answered your own question. Yeah, so Christianity is not Advaita. Christianity is pluralism. So God is separate from the being. A being can reach God to serve him, not to become one with him. Even when they see the goal of Christianity is salvation. Don't confuse salvation with moksha. They're two different things, very different things. So the goal of Christianity is salvation, and salvation is what? Eternal life in heaven, in the presence of God, where you will spend eternity praising him, worshipping him. So you're always below him. You reach heaven not to become one with God. You reach heaven to serve him for eternity, along with all the angels. So that is not being one with God. Advaita is what? Being one with God. You see God in every being. You have the potential of being one with God. You have the potential of being God. But in Christianity, no matter what you do, only your sins will be washed if you become a Christian. You are inherently sinful. And even after your conversion, you cannot do anything good by your own merit. You still need the continuous favor of God. And even after getting favor one time, it does not mean that you have the favor and you become this transformed person capable of being God or being in par with God or being one with God. Never. That stage will never come, because humans are still humans. You will only be washed of your sins, but still you are incapable of doing anything good by your own merit. No matter how many days you fast, no matter how much Bible you study, you read, how much you go to church, you can still not do anything good. If you do something good, it is because God made you do good. So they are very different. There is no concept of Advaita. There cannot be a concept of Advaita. In fact, that is blasphemy.
Okay, very clear. Thank you so much, Esther. That was very, very clear. And it was very important for me to get this answer because of the nonsense that's going on in Clubhouse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshmiji. RP Singh, you can ask your question.
Yeah, I don't have a question, just I have a statement to make, if that is fine.
If it is regarding the talk that was conducted?
Yeah, I mean, actually a relevant topic. I just wanted to add a point that the definition of service is that social service is that you don't expect anything in the return, and neither you try and campaign and advertise. So basically, the service provided by Teresa was in return for a feast, and that is to hang the cross. Whereas I have known particularly a leprosy treatment place in Haridwar where 300 people are treated any point of time with the entire family and no fees to be paid. There's just a service. So my definition is that if somebody is doing a true service, then two things would actually do a disservice to a service if a fees is asked for it in any format. And second, if it is being campaigned and advertised, there is a wording called Lok Prasiddhi Paramukha Jivan. So if a service is being done and it is being campaigned, I think then it is not the service that we expect as a social service. That is one point. And second is Hell's Angel is a book, is a movie by Christopher Hitchin. I think I've got somebody texted back channel. This is the movie recommended to be watched to actually expose the Teresa's deeds. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much. Phenomenally well done. And I have been enjoying this entire discussion, putting the truth in front of people and demystifying the mystery that is Teresa. So thank you so much for your time and arranging this program. Really appreciate.
Thank you.
Esther ji, any comments to that?
Yeah, it's not service anymore when you are expecting something out of it. So, in fact, not only service, Bhagavad Gita says that, even your karma, every karma that you do, every action that you do, it has to be phala-peksha-rahita. You do not expect, no apeksha of any phala as such. So it has to be free of all apeksha, all desires for a fruit. So when you're talking about service to humans, if it comes with conditions, it definitely is not human, which is why I said she cannot be called a mother. Because her love was not unconditional. And the only love that is in this material world that is unconditional is a mother's love. So her service was not service. Her love was not mother's love.
Very clear. I'll go to the next questioner. Ram, please go ahead.
Namaste. My question about Mrs. Teresa is whatever the missionary work she has done in Kolkata and across India, who was the main back supporters for her? Of course, there will be the Sabha or the Christian back end support, but other than that, what was the political this one, and who else were because she have boosted like a big thing in India, other than whatever the wrong things she have done, nothing has been came outside, but whatever the the polished thing came, so of course there will be somebody who to boost her and give her a good face, and then show her as a icon of India. So other than the Sabha or Christian this one, who was that?
Politically, I cannot comment. I mean, this is not the place for that. And we only can speculate at this point, and I don't like to make speculations. I don't talk about anything publicly unless and until I can back them, substantiate with facts and figures. That being said, the reason she shot to fame so quickly from being an obscure nun is this person called Malcolm Muggeridge. In the beginning of my talk, I mentioned a name called Arup Chatterjee. Arup Chatterjee has done excellent groundbreaking work in bringing out that aspect which nobody else talked about, which is how did an obscure nun become an international fame? So Malcolm Muggeridge is a journalist who was well connected both in the UK and US, especially the BBC. And you know how BBC is so anti-India, anti-Hindu, anti-Hinduism. So Malcolm Muggeridge had beautiful connections in those organizations, and he himself aspired to become a preacher, a pastor. He could not. So the next best thing he could do, the next close thing to becoming a preacher was to make somebody else a preacher and promote them. So that was Teresa. And if there was no Malcolm Muggeridge, there would be no Mother Teresa. There would just be a nun Teresa. The reason she became Mother Teresa is because of Malcolm Muggeridge. So you can go and read Arup Chatterjee's book. Excellently written, very gripping book. And that is where you'll find how Teresa shot to international fame. So it was carefully curated career of hers. And once she saw how enriching, and because she was already spiritually shallow and she had nothing to fall back on spiritually, she found solace in that popularity. Once she saw how nice it is, how enriching, how nice it is to be known by people, to be praised by people, to be written, applauded by print media, all kinds of media, she got addicted to popularity. He writes about this also. And that is how slowly she allowed them to build her career into this international icon, celebrity.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. So from the highest civilian award of India to many other awards, which is in the government level or private level, she got it. So of course she have a political support, but okay, yeah, since it is not a political discussion, so we can take it up there. And thank you for the reference also. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ram. Next one is Rick Banerjee, who was our guest last week. Rick, go ahead.
Pranam aap sabhi ko. So I have a generic question here. Like Teresa's deeds we know, and how media suppresses it, that also we know. But what I feel like as simple actionable goals, which all of us should follow, should be something like auditing all church lands and nationalizing all their education institutes and healthcare centers. That would be the major goals which we should work on long term to save our culture and civilization, and use these stories or events to spread awareness. This should be the roadmap which we should take, what I think, in my very limited understanding. Would you comment on this, Esther Ji?
Yes, I agree with you, Rick. And by the way, you don't have a limited understanding. You have very good understanding than majority of Indians in India, especially Hindus in India. So we learn by what you have to report. We have no clue on what was happening in Meghalaya, and thank you for that. I'm just using this opportunity to thank you because I didn't get a chance to thank you personally. So coming to the to that question, I definitely agree with you. We have to use these stories to raise awareness. We have to expose these less talked about facts about these people that are being glorified today, the people that have actually contributed to changing the demography, and as I said, disrupting the ecosystem of India. So of Hinduism especially. So these people definitely need to be exposed, and we will continue to do it whenever there is an opportunity, whenever there is a chance. And of the things that we don't have knowledge of, we will go research them, and we will expose these people and use these stories to raise awareness.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. SRG, actually, I have a question. I thought actually I will wait until the panel is clear for the time being. You had mentioned about actually you had doubts. Same way, Teresa also had her doubts, but you substantiated it and you went, you made a U-turn. But my question is actually now, when you had doubts and when you were actually thinking about it, how did you substantiate it? How did you substantiate it and actually now understood that, okay, this is not right and what I'm doing is wrong? How did you do that?
So luckily for me, I think I would attribute that, luck to my karma. I was a student of Christian studies, and I did not have any bosses that I had to report to. I was not under any obligation to think in a certain way. I had nothing to lose. Like I said, I listed a number of reasons. Who are the ones who will not sit down to scrutinize their the difficulties in their faith? People that have something to lose, people that have a vested interest, people that have an obligation to that community, leaders, Christian leaders, and people that have ego. So these are the people that won't sit down and scrutinize the faith. I was free of all these things. I was definitely looking at Christianity and my faith from a faith lens. Luckily, my academic study helped me remove that lens for a moment in life and put it aside. And I was purely looking through academic lens. So that was my good karma. I was fortunate enough. I was luckier than Teresa in that sense. I didn't have to continue in that dark hole of Christianity, which she had to, unfortunately. she had the chance, she had the resources, she had the chance. At the same time, her vested interests, her selfishness, her greed, her obligation to her bosses, everything disallowed her to actually sit down and scrutinize. But I would say if she, instead of writing these letters, wasting her time writing these letters, lamenting about her shallowness, emptiness, if she spent the time in the quiet of her bedroom to evaluate what was happening, and if she went ahead and read the literature, the critical literature, what the other side of it is saying, she would have definitely been saved today. Sorry for using that word, but that's the only word I can use, because when you're in darkness, you're not saved. You're saved when you're enlightened.
Absolutely. I have more questions, but actually there are more people in the question panel.
But did I answer your question, or did I digress?
You did. And you said actually you used your rationale to substantiate.
Without using the word, yes. I used my rationale, yes.
Got it. Dr. Cognitive, go ahead.
My question to Esther is that, as Anand Raghunathan said on one occasion, Hindus in India are now reduced to the 8th or 9th citizen level. So, do you think in Indian elite, the elite people of India, who are ruling India, or whoever, will they ever wake up and smell the coffee and reverse these measures, like the Right to Education Act and various things like that? All are just completely against Hindus and the indigenous civilization. So, do you think there will ever be a time when at least some of these measures will be reversed? Man, there is a level playing ground. Do you ever think that will happen in the future of India? Will it ever happen? Because everybody seems to be somehow or other trying to placate various vote banks. So that in that struggle, in that eagerness to placate vote banks and to win the elections, a lot of things are happening which are completely like anti-national and anti-civilizational for the indigenous people of India. So do you ever think that day will come, or some part of it will come? Do you ever think? Thank you very much.
Let us forget about what the politicians are doing. They're just doing what they know best to do. My question would be, do you want it to happen?
Sure.
So if you want it to happen, that sankalpa is the first step. We all want it to happen, but it won't happen just by having a desire. So it should be, there is a difference between, just a mere wishful thinking and a sankalpa. So have that sankalpa, go with it. There are, earlier there were only dozens wanting this to happen, this change to come. Now there are thousands, soon there'll be millions. So we have to keep doing what we do. And I just referred to that, lesson from Bhagavad Gita, which says, do your karma, give your contribution, the falapeksha rahita karma. Have a goal, but having a goal is not bad. I'm not saying that. But whatever you do, don't expect any fruits for your effort. Just have that goal, go towards that goal. Yes, I see, I'm positive. In my lifetime, I will see the change. I will see more and more people waking up. If you go on Twitter and look randomly, so many people have in their bio ex-secular. I love the word ex-secular more than the word ex-Muslim or ex-Christian. That's my favorite word now, because these so-called seculars are bigger enemies to dharma than Christians and Muslims, I would say. So earlier you wouldn't find so many, but now they are openly declaring themselves as being formally secular. So they are waking up. The awakening is happening thanks to the people, thanks to social media, thanks to freedom of speech that Indian Constitution gives. So yes, I'm hopeful, I'm positive, and we will win this war.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cognitive. Next one is Santosh. Santosh, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Ravi. Good morning, Esther ji. I have a question about Hinduism and Christianity, because the context is that I've been talking or interacting or talking against Bible and Christianity for the past 1 year, but it appears to me that whether we like it or not, the solution from Christianity is like, you don't have to know anything, just believe Jesus. That's all. Everything will be taken care of. So it's a one short answer to all of your problems. A person doesn't need to understand most of the things like karma, moksha, or whatever the thing. Now, because when we fight against conversion and evangelical activities and all, ideologically, this becomes a hurdle, because one side you see a one hand solution to all your problems. Forget about the money and all the things which evangelists offer. I'm not talking about their financial capability at all, but just from the point of conversion point of view. On the other side, from Hindu side, people are even not sure what is dharma, what is, and even there is a huge discussion about what is sanatana. There is nothing called sanatana. It's a cooked up story. So even the Hindus are, and even the Hindu saints, the so-called saints, are all endorsing Jesus. He's Vedanti, he's blah blah blah, and everything. So it's kind of a, like you just said before, you like the word secular, because these people are trying to whitewash Jesus as a, even through that also you can get attended. So in this context, how do you think that we can actually counter Christianity? This is my question, but what the rest was the scenario. Thank you, Esther.
So are you working on the ground countering conversions directly?
No, I'm in fact, I met you also a few months back in Delhi. So like we are only doing work, talk on Clubhouse and other social media as of now. But while talking with more and more people, this is how this seems to be a one hand solution for them. Just believe in Jesus. Don't know much about the yeah.
Yeah. So believing in Jesus will remove all problems. Right? That's the statement they make. That's the claim they make. Then Christians
that's the solution they offer.
Right. Solutions for all problems. So Christians, once converted, Christians should not meet with accidents. Christians should not divorce. Christians should not have a child who is rebellious or disobedient. Christian girls should not be, in difficult situations, like should not be raped. They should not be ill health. There should not be ill health. So is that happening? Africa, one of the most Christian countries in the world, has the most number of people dying of hunger every day. Even maybe during the course of this talk, hundreds of children, men and women may have died of hunger. So the most Christian country. So if Jesus solves problems, Christians should not have any problems at all. Is that the case? So their claims can be easily refutable. There is so much of information online already. Just a few years back, this much of information was not there. More and more writings are coming from the West, from where Christianity came to us. So there is a counter for every claim that Christianity makes. More so about this problem-solving ability of Jesus has been countered number of times, and it has been falsified by a number of people. And I mean, you can counter. You can ask this question. You can say, do Christians don't die in accidents? So if their problems are solved, if God is with them always, God has promised to protect them at all times, why didn't God avoid that accident? Don't Christians get cancer? Haven't Christians died in COVID? Don't Christians die in calamities along with non-Christians? So that claim that Jesus solves all problems, takes away all human problems, is easily refutable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Santosh. Esther, actually, I'll come back to my questions. I guess actually there are a few. I mean, the speaker panel is at the moment. We are waiting for more questioners. You said, actually, no, Teresa had doubts, and those doubts, when she raised with her boss or supervisors, they used it actually for their advantage, and actually used it actually as a means to actually coerce her into doing their what they want to do. Isn't it actually it is still happening in the religion in terms of whenever people have doubts, they actually put the fear of God in them, or you say that actually you are not praying enough, you are not suffering enough, and try to use it in that manner. Your opinion?
Are you asking, does it still happen?
Yes, I mean, I'm asking actually, doesn't it still going on?
It still happens. Yes, it happens every day. Raviji, it is as human beings, we have.
The question is, how do that equate with actually, being close to God? Is the actual part of it, that suffering and everything, and how they are actually equating it to? Yeah.
Okay. How they are equating it to? Okay, in the case of Teresa, they simply had to bring the suffering of Jesus because she already had acute, intense love for Jesus. I read in one of her biographies that Teresa was not a very beautiful youngster, beautiful teenager. So, and she was living at a time when beauty was given the highest importance in the society, to get married or to even get into a relationship and all that. So Teresa lacked all that. So the next best thing but every human being craves for love in his or her life, right? So her solace, she found the solace in being married to Jesus. So what does being married to Jesus mean? I mean, she never thought that she could get married and find love among humans. So her next bet was Jesus, finding love, being loving and being able to be being loved by Jesus. So how can you enter into a spousal love with Jesus? By becoming a nun. So that is one of her reasons for becoming the nun. I'm not saying that is the only reason, but this is how I deciphered when I read that entire that part of her life. So they found, her bosses saw that she was intensely in love with Jesus. And they found a very good person who can Christianize India. And India was a hot place for them with all that was happening because of British policies, the famine and all that. So that was the right time to strike India. And along came Teresa with her love for Jesus. So they saw this was the best time to Christianize India, and they found the candidate who could do that. Now, when this candidate came up with questions, they were afraid. What if Teresa leaves? Where do we find such a good candidate? She was intelligent. They said, I mean, not to question her faith or blind belief or superstitions and all that, but she was materially, she was very organized. She had great organizational skills and great leadership skills. So for a boss to remotely operate, activity, a project, he needs on the ground a very organized, a great leader with great leadership qualities. They found that in Teresa. But when Teresa came back to them with doubts, they didn't want to lose her. They had to manipulate their way and put her back into that system. Retain her in that system, not put her back. She never left it. Retain her in that system. So for that, they used her own love for Jesus as their tool. They said, the more you suffer, he's putting you through this suffering because you are the right person to satiate his thirst. So that is how they twisted that theology. And there is, luckily for them, there is also the suffering of Jesus, the passion of Christ, it is called in the Christian world. So Jesus also suffered lonely. He was alone on the cross. So they took this aspect of Teresa, they took that aspect, the suffering aspect of Jesus, and the country that was ripe for conversions. To their luck, all these things just fell in place for them. So that was the right time, and they could not leave that opportunity. And as creators of a whole religion, it's not new for them to concoct theologies and doctrines, right? So they concocted this whole twisted theology and they used it on her to manipulate her.
So basically, they equated suffering with the salvation, and the suffering over here will lead to actually salvation beyond life or afterlife, something like that, isn't it?
I'm not sure if we can equate, if they were trying to equate suffering with salvation at that point, but they were definitely equating Jesus's love for souls, making Jesus' love for souls the crux of her missionary activity.
And I have also heard actually from various documentaries and all that, and she has received actually a lot of funding from different parts of the world. And these fundings were in general towards actually the work that she was doing as charity and actually taking care of patients and all that. But in reality, majority of those funds never went to them, it seems. And there was an a nun who was with her at that time has said they have even washed like syringes and reused them.
Reused.
So where did that fund go? What was actually what is happening behind that?
I mean, the fund definitely went to the organization and rooted back to her bosses. See, there is a fund that was given for a certain cause. It was not used for that cause. The organization received the fund, that is a reality. The fund was not used for the cause, that is another reality. So isn't it obvious where the fund went? Into whose coffers the fund went? It definitely went to the coffers of the Vatican, definitely.
Definitely.
The Catholic organizations in between.
Very clear. I mean, as in like the funds were used for their religious activities or conversions or whatever. Yes. But what actually amazed me is that actually somebody who is taking care of these people were not very much actually affected by that. These funds were not used for it, was actually what amazed me. Even Teresa didn't feel like, okay, no, we have these funds coming in, but we are not using for the right people. That's what amazed me. That's what.
Yeah, which is what confirms the fact that where her loyalties lied. So she didn't care about human beings, Raviji, not at all. I mean, read her entire work in relation with her theology and her theology and faith. I mean, how she perceived Christianity and the Bible and Jesus and all that. So read her work in relation with her theology, and you will understand that she had not even an iota of sympathy for human beings and human suffering. Nothing moved her. The only thing that moved her was she just wanted to get back Jesus, who she felt abandoned her. She had to bring him back into her heart. That was her only goal. And she thought she wove this story herself, or maybe she was given this story by her bosses, saying that as long as you win souls for Jesus, as long as you are quenching his thirst for souls, he will be happy with you. And at some point, he'll come back into your heart. So that was her only goal. So I would say that is selfish motive. So to win back, it's like to win back my child who has left home, I am putting everybody else to suffering. Everybody that he hates or he loves to suffering. I mean, I'm basically giving in to the emotional blackmail of my child. And in the process, to win him back, I will go to any extreme, put anybody to any kind of suffering. I'm not bothered about any of them. I'm just bothered about bringing back my son home, bringing my son home.
The humanitarian efforts were a facade in that sense.
Definitely. They were.
And one thing actually you mentioned during the talk, actually, and I noted it down, that every nun longed to attain the sainthood. I didn't know that actually it was a goal in terms of being nuns and priests and to have that sainthood is there. Can you elaborate a little bit on that, actually the background of that?
Again, nuns do not have anything much to look forward to in their lives, right? They do not have a marriage relationship. They do not have any relationships with anybody. They even leave homes, their parents. So it's like more like it. You can equate it to sannyasi in Hinduism. So the only thing they are looking forward to is how they are able to appease their God. That is the first goal. Now, in the process, what is the highest reward for appeasing God? Sainthood. In Catholicism, it's a sainthood. So you have done excellent work to appease your God. So appeasing God and sainthood go parallelly, I would say. So when you are given sainthood, it means that you did your God appeasing task perfectly to the T. So that appeasing God is equated to sainthood. So in that sense, I would say that sainthood was their goal. That is also a way of saying that appeasing God to the fullest is their goal. Appeasing Jesus, because they're appeasing their husband, basically. So they only work to find favor in their husband's eyes. That's all.
Absolutely.
So if that is when the Catholic Church, when the Vatican gives them sainthood, it means they did their job well, and that is satisfactory to them.
Very clear. I'll end my questions with actually a generic one. Usually, when at the point of conversions, or usually even in clubhouses also, the Christianity always accuses of Hinduism of casteism. And they say that actually, people are not equal, people are actually at different levels, and all those things actually we really hear. I mean, you also would have heard this 100 times. But in reality, isn't it a hypocrisy on their side? Even doesn't it actually have even bigger levels of casteism, actually, even in the different forms, churches and its different forms?
Yeah, hypocrisy, thy name is Christianity. The other word for hypocrisy is Christianity. There is so much of discrimination, at least in our Shastras. The root of the source of caste system is not our Shastras. Yes, there is Varnashram, the misinterpreted, misunderstood form of Varnashram is caste system. But we cannot say that the source of caste system as it is practiced today is in our Shastras. But the source of discrimination is the Bible, I would say. People justified slavery on the basis of verses from the Bible. Even Jesus may not have said, go and take slaves, but Jesus did not even condemn slavery. He never condemned slavery. In fact, he advised slaves to obey their masters. What does that mean? Is he condoning slavery? So, discrimination is rooted in the Bible. There are so many verses where they say that in the Old Testament, they say that this is how slaves should behave. There is a whole manual for how slaves should conduct themselves, for how much slaves can be bought, for how masters should treat their slaves. So discrimination starts there. And the sense of othering. See, there may not be caste discrimination, but discrimination is discrimination, right? Whether on the basis of class, creed, caste, whatever. So the moment you say that you are bound to hell, you are going off to hell, you are others, we are we, the us and them concept itself comes from discrimination, is the result of discrimination. And where does this we and us come from? The Bible. Why are they not looking at we and us as discrimination and not defining it as discrimination? I would say it is discrimination. Okay, let's talk about caste differences, caste discrimination. Is it not there in the church? It is there in the church. Even class discrimination is there in the church. So every church has a few, small churches. Small churches have in villages and rural areas, and in lower income areas, there are a few chairs, and then there are mats to sit on. So people that are coming from the slums and all those, they are made to sit on one side on the floor. And people that are little educated, I'm a witness to that. people that are little educated and from a urban background or little belonging to good class in the society would be made to sit on the chair. There are I have even witnessed when there are no empty chairs and a few of these uneducated, illiterate people are sitting on the chair. They are made to empty it when there is an educated person coming. So isn't that discriminating on the basis of education and class and all that? So, and again, talk about there is a Reddy Christian matrimony. There is Kamma Christian matrimony, Brahmin Christian matrimony. Why isn't, I mean, in my family, they do not want to give away my nieces and nephews to non-Brahmins. They want Brahmin converts for them. So why isn't a Brahmin Christian marrying a Dalit Christian? Why are they even looking at Brahmin Christian, Dalit Christian, Reddy Christian, Agarwal Christian? So there is clear discrimination. They have taken caste to a whole different level, and not only caste, class, and internationally, if you look at all this discrimination, there is still racial discrimination in so-called first world countries. So yeah, source of discrimination is the Bible, unlike in Hinduism.
That reminds me that recently I have read the obituary. In that obituary, it was mentioned that it was a Christian obituary, and it is mentioned that the family is a Brahmin family, Nambudiri family, which is being converted by Saint Thomas. And from that, the lineage is coming from and all. There, a big description was written where Saint Thomas has converted the family from the being Nambudiris and all that, and the church and everything comes on the bottom. And maybe the history of Saint Thomas actually was written in maybe 5-6 sentences, and maybe the one sentence says actually which church they belong to. So they still carry that the thing with them.
Yeah, that actually reminds me. Good, you brought it up. Yes, the Nambudiri Christians claim their lineage all the way back to Saint Thomas, and I mean, whose existence is not even confirmed by history. So they have a different attitude altogether. Like we are the what do you call royal blood, the blue blood Christians of India. And they definitely look down upon the other Christians. So if that is not discrimination, what is?
They seems to be like actually they are the first Christians in the country.
Yeah, the blue blood, the real blood, true blood Christians. Pioneers.
Vidyaji, do you have any question?
Yeah, actually, Esther, this is more a personal question. Can you hear me?
I can hear. I can hear you, Vidyaji.
It's a little bit of a connectivity issue here. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, Esther, when you got into your divinity studies and you were deep into it, you were completely immersed in it. When was it that that wow moment, or that that eureka moment, that there's something is wrong with this particular the set of scriptures that you are learning, and that you needed to start looking out for something which is not part of Christianity, which made you feel that Sanatana Dharma is probably the this thing that you need to go back to? Like, when was it that moment of realization for you?
Okay, I've said this on several platforms. I'll say it again.
I'm sorry, I hope I'm not...
No worries, yeah, for the benefit of the current audience.
Vidyaji's another question was like, when you realized about the falsehood of that, you could have become a rationalist, but you came back to Sanatana Dharma, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. So, Vidyaji, the timeline, there is a huge gap between when I realized Christianity was not what I was taught it to be, and when I embraced, yes, Sanatana Dharma is what is the truth to go on, walk on. So there is a huge time gap between these two phases. So the first one, that Christianity is not what it was, I was told it was when I was doing my academic studies. And it was the very first semester. I had enrolled in the divinity studies. It's a 4.5 to 5 years research-oriented degree. And it was the very first semester when my doubts started. I was taking a course called the New Survey of New Testament introductions. Old Testament introduction. So I used to love Old Testament. I still love Old Testament. I like Old Testament because there is more criticism and absurdity and illogical, references in the Old Testament, which is why I love it now. But previously, I love history. And the reason I used to love Old Testament is I believed that as an Indian, I believed that India is a very old civilization, in par with the civilizations that were mentioned in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the Mesopotamian, the Mediterranean, the Egyptian, the Sumerian. So it was as old as them, if not more. I mean, for their benefit, I'm just saying that. I now know that it is way older than any of these civilizations. So I was looking for the mention of my civilization in the Old Testament. As a believer in the Bible, as a Christian, I was looking like, why isn't my civilization mentioned? Did God not have a plan for us? Did God not include us in his creation? Why are we left out? Why am I left out? So this used to bother me a lot. And I used to read Old Testament word to word in the hopes of finding my race being mentioned in there. So maybe I missed something. Maybe, it is not told in straight words. It's not told in, explicitly. Maybe I have to read in between the lines, which is why my interest, my love for Old Testament grew. So that was the very first course that I took. When I saw that course on the list of some 60 some courses in my degree, that's the first course I picked up. But as soon as I started reading it, now this is a course in apologetics. Apologetics is the defense of religion, defense of Christianity. That's a whole branch within Christian studies, which gives you arguments to defend Christian claims. So as a student of Christian apologetics, the textbooks that I was reading were all in defense of Christian claims. So this apologist, the textbook author, who is an apologist, theologian, the textbook wrote that there are difficulties in the Bible. I think second or third chapter in that book. First semester, second or third chapter of the very first course that I took, my doubts began. It says clearly that the Bible has difficulties, it has contradictions and inconsistencies, but now imagine when I'm somebody who has practiced Christianity for 25 years before that, believing that the Bible is the inerrant, no errors, no falsities, inerrant, infallible word of God. That is the word, that is how the Bible is described in Christian studies circles. The inerrant, infallible, divine word of God. That is what I believe the Bible to be. And now an apologist who is supposed to defend Christianity in a course which I am studying to become an apologist, a future apologist, I read that the Bible has inconsistencies and contradictions, and he goes on to defend them. But my reading stopped at but. I was not bothered about how he was defending. I'm like, what? The Bible is fallible? The Bible has errors, inconsistencies, but then it is God's word. How can God be errant and fallible? So that was a trigger point, but it's not as if I went to bed that night and woke up the next morning quitting Christianity. It wasn't like that. The ordeal went on for the next 2 or 3 months, and my degree went on for the next 4.5 years. I continued. I read more and more books. And whenever I found that this apologist was referring to a particular critic of Christianity and he referenced a book, I would get that book and read what that critic actually said and where he was coming from. So starting from there, my journey, it was very painful, like how Teresa described. it was that emptiness slowly set in, the shallowness set in, then the absurdities showed up, the inconsistencies showed up. It was the same Bible, mind you. And I used to read 10 chapters every day of the year, 10 chapters from the Bible. But when I started reading them after enrolling in the course, my whole perspective changed. I started reading with the information I gathered from the critics' perspective. So that actually helped me understand where the critics were coming from. And then when I read the apologetic arguments, I found them to be very, very shallow, very childish, and very manipulative logic. And from there, coming to the second part of your question, Raviji, yes, I went through atheism, agnosticism, and then to Sanatan Vedic philosophy. So in America, when you quit Christianity, the next worldview you fall upon is atheism. Because every prominent Christian that quit Christianity in the US became an atheist. So, but because I have my roots in Sanatana Dharma, so I did not stop with atheism. I was not satisfied with the answers atheism gave, because atheism doesn't give any answers. It doesn't say we know. It says we just don't know. We don't know, which is still honesty, I would say. So I love that honesty about atheism. So I knew atheism was not for me, because if not Christianity, it has to be something else. Because there were a few experiences I cannot refute, I cannot deny. So I went looking beyond atheism. I landed in agnosticism. I read Carl Sagan for a very long time. I still like him. I still like his writings. So after agnosticism, that was the time I relocated to India as an agnostic. After I came here, after I became public about which was in 2018, I started meeting the gurus. Because of my public discourses, I had access to some of these teachers, Hinduism teachers. I used to talk to them. I used to debate with them. And in the process, I learned a lot. Then they suggested me some books. And then I started reading them. I still read them. I'm not saying I have arrived as a Sanatani. I'm still a learner, and I think we all are, and we will continue to be for I don't know how many janmas. But that's my journey in a nutshell. So it was not overnight, and I did go through atheism. I read a lot of literature in atheism. I said, this is not for me. I read a lot of literature in agnosticism. I said, there has to be more. This is not the end. This cannot be it. And that is how I came into Sanatan philosophy.
Thank you, Esther ji. Actually, we have completed about 2 hours now. Vidyaji?
Yeah.
Did I answer your question, Vidyaji?
Yes, perfectly, Esther ji. Thank you so much.
And I see that actually you didn't drink any water until now for the last 2 hours.
I didn't get any cough. I'm recovering from laryngitis. I usually don't take antibiotics, but today I had to take. I see my voice is now sounding hoarser than when I started this talk. Yeah.
Sorry for actually putting you through this trouble, but it was a very waiting session. Right. I hope the questions were all right, especially from myself and Vidyaji were also all right.
Okay, Raviji. Yeah, anything that will enlighten the audience, that will help. I mean, when they go back from this session, hopefully they'll know a little more than what they came to this session with. So that's the goal, right, of these talks.
Absolutely. And I know that like, some of these questions were asked to you repeatedly. And I believe the people have to hear it over and over again so that they will retain it.
Yes.
So it was a really wonderful session.
Yeah.
Riveting session. And I know that actually you are a lot of activities in terms of the enrichment and enlightenment of the people and Sanatana Dharma. And we give we are in full support of it, and actually we wish all the best with that, and achieve your goals and everything. And we'll be in support anytime you do.
Definitely. I just want to say on this note that we have recently, myself and there's another person called Jerome Anto. I hope you know, I think you know him. So both of us have filed an impleading application in the case PIL that Ashwini Upadhyay ji filed, pleading the Supreme Court to come up with an anti-conversion law, a central anti-conversion law. So if the Supreme Court accepts our application, Jerome and I will be the co-petitioners in that case. And I need all your blessings and your inputs, your good wishes to win this and get that much desired, much anticipated anti-conversion law.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll definitely actually have it in our prayers. Definitely.
Thank you so much.
It is actually the need of the hour, I would say.
Yes,
With not just actually Christian conversions, but also with actually the Muslim conversions and love jihad.
Many conversions.
Yes. Need of the hour.
Definitely.
I think Vidyaji, actually, your network is a bit laggy.
Actually, if you can just give me a second, Ravi, let me. Just a second. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, just a second. Just a second. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me? Because I'm just trying to pin the talk with SG and Jerome G has been on the YouTube link. No, I'm just trying to pin that.
Yeah, it was on the city media, and I have heard that it was like a wonderful session.
It shows connection loss. Just a second.
Yeah, yeah. Vidyaji, actually, you can, maybe I'll help with that.
Yeah, just a second.
Before
We
close,
can
we'll
have
pin it there.
that, Raviji.
What is that? Vasaji, I didn't hear.
So we can have a talk on that just to explain on what grounds did we petition.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's coming.
Yes, yes, please do. Yeah. And actually, we definitely can have that talk. Actually, now, two things actually you mentioned. One is actually the comparative study, and the other one actually this one actually on the grounds in which the petition was filed. It would be a very enlightening one. Definitely, and we can have Jerome Ji also on the
Yes,
session.
I wouldn't want him to be on the show.
Definitely, on the background, actually, we will check on the dates, availability, and all, and we will definitely schedule that too. That would be really informative for the people.
January and until mid-Feb. I'm traveling, so after that,
No issues. And SSG, actually, now for you, actually, our doors are always open anytime you need.
Thank you so much, Luigi.
All right. So I thank actually everybody who came to listen to us, and those who have come up for the questions, and especially Esther Ji for actually devoting so much time to us and explaining it really well. Such a riveting session, and we wish actually all the best to her, and all success in her endeavors. Thank you, Esther Ji.
Thank you, Raviji. Thank you, Vidya Ji.
All right.
And thanks to all the listeners for joining in.
So, Satyameva Jayate, let the truth always win.
Warrior that you are. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.